Hey guys, it's Alex, and today I'm here with a book review for In the Lake of the Woods by Tim O'Brien. I was recommended this book by Brian over at Bookish, and I will link his channel down below. This is an adult mystery novel set around John Wade, who recently lost a race for the US Senate. Within a few days of his defeat, his wife goes missing. I gave this book 3 stars, and I'm not quite sure how I feel about it. It was a good novel. It was something that I consider very well crafted, very well written. I was interested by it, but the entire time I was reading it, I always felt like I should have been liking it more than I was, for how good it was, for how well done it was, for all the interesting elements that I personally very much enjoy. I like books that have a political backdrop. I like books that deal with the Vietnam War. I love missing persons cases. And yet, there was something about this book that I just didn't connect with. This was essentially a character study of John Wade as a person. It covers him from his childhood all the way up until his wife goes missing and after. And it's written as though compiled by an investigator. There is a narrator in this book who's not entirely present all of the time. A lot of it is written just from the third person. The narrator doesn't insert himself too much. Just enough that it makes an impact on the story, which I enjoyed, because I do think that's an element that can be very easily overdone. It annoyed me in the Lemony Snicket books, A Series of Unfortunate Events, but in this it was just a little bit, just that hint of it, that you knew it was happening, but it was never overbearing, and I really enjoyed that. Most of the book does read like a typical narrative. It covers John Wade's life, it covers his childhood, it covers his time in Vietnam, it covers the present day as his wife is missing. But there are also chapters that are titled Evidence, that just have quotes from other people that were involved in the case, whether they're family and friends, or coworkers, or people who lived there, or the police involved, which I found very interesting. I really liked those chapters because I thought it was a very interesting element to the story that I don't see much, and I thought it was very well done. There were also chapters called Hypothesis, which was the narrator making assumptions on what could have happened, just exploring the possibilities of what could have happened to John Wade's wife. Because we never know what happened for sure. This is not a book that gives you closure, and that's not a spoiler. It's explicitly stated like 30 or so pages in that if you're looking for closure, if you're looking for answers, this is not the book for you. And I did like that it gave that warning, because I don't mind books that don't have, entirely closure in the endings, but I do think it's good to know what to expect in that regard. And since it told me, I have no qualms about putting it in the review. It's also told non-linearly. It mixes his past, his present, his future. All of it's kind of like jumbled together. And I normally really don't like non-linear stories. They don't work for me. I have a hard time wrapping my brain around them. But I thought this one was fairly well done. Again, well done. This whole book was very well done. I liked it better than I usually like non-linear stories, and it worked for me a lot more. I do still prefer a linear narrative, but with regard specifically to this book, it worked very well. It was very clear to follow, it was very easy to follow, and I think it worked because each of the events weren't a narrative in itself. When it would skip back to his childhood, sure, they were in order to a degree, and there was a narrative there. It was just that all the scenes from his childhood painted a picture, and it didn't matter so much what the order of them was. It was just all together they meant something more. And I think that's why it worked for me, because the order of the different time periods didn't matter as much as just the overall meaning of the scenes. One thing that I didn't like, that was kind of a small thing, was that O'Brien would at points talk about the future. He would say John would wonder about this moment in 2 days when his wife disappeared. And I didn't like that. I'm never really a fan of that. I think for me, it creates some distance from the story. It removes the immediacy, and it makes me care just a little bit less. It wasn't a huge deal. It's never really a huge deal, but it does just create that little bit of distance that makes me like a book slightly less. And I do think, just for me, for my personal taste, this book was a tiny bit too convoluted, just with all the different timelines, with the evidence chapters, because the evidence wasn't really in order. It was kind of just like there. I like things to be in a very specific, very clear order, and it wasn't so much that it was hard to follow, it's just that I really like having everything in order, and there was too much in this book that was too out of order for me to be able to put it in order. The order didn't so much matter, but just mentally I wanted to put it there, and it kind of bothered me that I couldn't. So I don't think that would bother many people. It's just because I personally really care about that sort of thing, and I do really struggle with nonlinear books for that reason. But just in this, there'd be quotes in the evidence sections that would come from various interviews, and I kept trying to keep track of which interviews they came from, which really didn't matter to the story. It was just something that I wanted to keep track of and I wanted to be able to, and I couldn't. So that did impact my enjoyment, but I don't know that that would bother many other people. I didn't find the main character as interesting as I should have. This was a character study, so it was kind of just about John Wade the person. And John Wade was a pretty terrible person. He's written intentionally as a terrible person. He stalked his wife when they were first dating. He talks frequently about manipulations and how much he enjoys manipulating people, which is why he likes politics, why he's good at politics. And those things can be very well done. They can be very interesting. And he felt like a whole and complete person. He was a very well fleshed out character. I just didn't care about him as much as I wanted to. I was interested by him, but not so much invested in him. And I think that was kind of my problem with this book overall. I was interested in this book. It only took me 2 days to read. And it's kind of a little bit of a dense book. Not super dense, but a little dense. I always wanted to pick it up. It was easy to get into. I was down to read it. I just wasn't as invested as I needed to be. And I don't really know why. I felt like I should have really enjoyed this book. I should have loved this book. This is the kind of book that I genuinely should have loved because there were so many elements I enjoyed. It was so well done. But I didn't. It was just kind of like decent, but not much more. The only final point I have that was negative was like kind of the big negative thing for me, but also it was a very small point within the story itself. At one point, the narrator is kind of talking about what he thinks could have happened, and he kind of questions the likelihood of John Wade killing his wife because he says John was crazy about her, so he wasn't sure he could buy that. And that bothered me because I just didn't like that that was added to the story. Like, he was like, oh, well, I don't really believe that John Wade would have killed her just because he was so crazy about her. He wouldn't have killed her because he loved her. And it was like, no, like, plenty of men who love their wives, who are crazy about their wives, who are obsessed with their wives, kill their wives. Like, he stalked her. He did all these horrible things. He was obsessed with her. Like, he was genuinely obsessed with her. And, like, yes, he loved her too, but it wasn't healthy. And it wasn't treated as healthy in the book. I don't have a problem with that. It was just that one line where the narrator expressed disbelief that he could have killed his wife because he was crazy about her, when for me that made it more likely that he could have killed his wife. But that was literally just one line of this book. It didn't ruin it. It didn't impact my rating. It just, that was probably the one thing that really bothered me as opposed to like the kind of other small things. Because in general, this was a good book. I can't figure out why I didn't like it more. Why I didn't care more about it. And I would recommend it if it sounds interesting to you. Like, if you read the description and it sounds interesting, I definitely recommend picking it up because I thought the writing was well done. I thought everything was well done. I keep saying that because it's just, I didn't connect as much as I wanted to. And I definitely do plan to check out more of Tim O'Brien's works. I keep getting recommended his more famous one that I'm forgetting the name of right now, but I'm sure like 5 people will mention it in the comments. But I definitely will read more of his work because this was a good book. It just, I don't know, there was that weird disconnect for me where I didn't enjoy it as much as I should have. Let me know down below if you've read In the Lake of the Woods and what you thought of it if you had. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see y'all again soon.